Welcome to GPS, God's Prophetic Surprises, where we open up the book of Revelation and see what surprise God might have in store for us. I'm Jon Paulien. I'm a professor of religion at the School of Religion, Loma Linda University, and with me is
Deanna Chambers from the Calamasa Church.
And I'm Philip Milosavljevic of the Loma Linda University Church, where I'm a young adult pastor.
Awesome. Well, when we were closing last time, we were talking about the mystery of God, and we looked up a number of texts in the Old Testament and also a couple of texts in the New. How do you remember that impacting you?
I think you said something that was really profound to me, is that the gospel is at the heart of the book of Revelation, and you catch that idea through that Greek word euangelizo, this mystery of God. And we went to Revelation, we went to Daniel, we went to Amos, we went all over, just kind of, and this very word, the mystery, and God reveals His mystery. He doesn't leave it secret, He doesn't leave it hidden. And I think that's the beauty of Revelation, is that we find that the mystery is now told. Where Daniel was told by the angel, hey, seal this up until the time of the end. Seal it up, keep it bound, hidden, covered, because the end is not here. Now we are at the end. And now it's time for that mystery to be revealed, so that God's people can be encouraged proceeding to the time of Jesus coming again.
So what it tells me is that gospel in some sense must be in the book of Daniel too.
Yeah.
You have any idea, Vianna, from your reading of the book of Daniel in the past, where would you see the gospel in the book of Daniel?
I don't know, because I haven't studied the book of Daniel. I just started seminary, for those of you wondering why I'm a pastor and don't know about Daniel. So I haven't gotten quite there yet.
What about in Daniel 2, with the great stone that comes and destroys all the kingdoms, and this mountain emerges, this idea that God's kingdom will reign at the very end, this idea of no other kingdom shall proceed or be above and over, but He is above it all. I think that's a beautiful thing. Or then,
so if you define the gospel as God's active intervention in human life or in human affairs and stuff, then certainly the stone would be an active intervention.
Yeah.
But Jesus, were you going to say?
No.
Okay.
I was going to say one more.
All right.
Okay, so the lion's den.
Okay, hold off on that, because I want to talk about the stone.
Okay.
Jesus actually talks about that stone. Remember? There's a stone on which people stumble,
Yeah.
and those who stumble at the stumbling stone, the rock will crush them. I think that's a reference to Daniel 2. So the rock at the end of time is sort of the consequence. How we react to the gospel will determine, how the stone will apply one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Stones.
The lion's den.
Hit us.
So, I think of the lion's den as one space where you have the idea of God's hand intervening in human lives. That is very real in a very dynamic way. And so we are, and it's more maybe allegorical in nature in how I'm interpreting this, but you have this idea that Satan, who is known as a roaring lion, right? Isn't it 1 Peter 5:8? And Satan, whom is a roaring lion, looking to whom he may devour. And here is Daniel thrown into a pit with these lions. And yet, like Joseph, who was told, hey, what Satan meant for evil, God will use for good. And here he's in the pit, the lions are surrounding him, and God yet used that space to build Daniel's faith, to say, hey, you can be in the most impossible circumstances, but I am with you, and I will hold the pestilence. Though 1,000 fall at your left, 10,000 at your right, I am with you. That is the true essence of Emmanuel, God with us. I think that's the beauty of the gospel come forth, right? In this story, even though there might be a better place that you might be thinking of.
Well, I just thought of one. If we're finding the gospel in different ways. My mind traveled. I was like, Jon, I was not prepared for this question, but then a story came to my mind. And I taught it to my kids the other day, and it was the story of obedience when Daniel and his Daniel's friends refused to bow down to the statue. And in that moment, I told them a life of obedience had given them this authority to stand in the face of death and stand for God. And then I told them, like, they were being dragged into this furnace, and then God appeared inside of it. I made the point to tell them that that was not a time to make a choice for God or to make a choice to have a relationship with God, saying, all right, God, I'm about to step into this fiery furnace. Let's get to know each other quickly so that I might jump over everything that's going to come. And I said, but the testimony of this fourth person, of this God with them in the fire, testified to this deep relationship that they had carried, and it carried them into the fire and out of the fire, and so much that we could learn from that story. I loved it so much. So thanks for sparking my memory.
Preach, Pastor Vienna. I like that. Man, that was good. I'm ready for the altar call.
Yeah. So you don't know nothing about Daniel. You know something. Very good.
That was
very
great.
Good. Yeah, and we're all learning together. But I think the exciting part is to realize then that this mystery concept in Revelation 10:7 is grounded in Daniel. But in Daniel, it's looking forward. The mystery, it's a mystery to Nebuchadnezzar, but I'm going to unpack to you, Nebuchadnezzar, mysteries that will happen in the future. Maybe, Philip, if you'd read Daniel 2:44-45. We didn't read it last time because we were running short of time, but that also speaks to it, what you read in verses 27-29.
Daniel 2?
Yeah, 44 and 45.
All right.
Which is Daniel's explanation.
All right, Daniel 2:24.
Did you say 42 or 24?
44 and 45.
Okay.
44.
Yeah.
And here it says, and in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw a stone that was cut from the mountain by no human hand, that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, the God who has made known to this king what shall be after this. The dream is certain and its interpretation sure.
So the mystery of God is that in the end is God's kingdom. Now, could Jesus apply Daniel 2 to his day? Because what did Jesus say was happening when he arrived? Do you all remember? When Jesus appears on the scene in Matthew and Mark and in Luke, what does he say?
The kingdom of heaven is at hand.
The kingdom of heaven is here.
Yeah.
It's here.
Right.
So he uses the word near, but it's in the past. So the kingdom of God has, in a sense, arrived.
Yeah.
So Jesus sees his message, his arrival, as opening up that mystery. So that ties right in. The stone and all the rest of that ties in. So the mystery in Daniel is going to happen in the future. But when Jesus comes, he said, the kingdom is now. The kingdom is here. But if that's the case, why are we still here? If Jesus ushered in the kingdom of God, why are we still here?
I think we talked about that a few sessions ago, and I thought that was a very good point. You know, I think it's 2 Peter, if I'm not mistaken. And there, this beautiful revelation emerges that God has a patience, 2 Peter 3:9. How does it say? He is slow, but not slow as we would think. He is slow so that all might be saved. So there is this heart within God's desire that as many as possible might reach salvation. I think the only question then that leaves me is, every year someone comes to an understanding of God, there are more that come to a disbelief of God. Every year someone is being born, someone is also dying. So what kind of math is God doing? Right?
I want to like put more of a bird's eye perspective, and John, correct me if I'm going left field with Philip's comment, but when I think of that, I almost feel like God left this huge like volcano, just this bomb of goodness, and over time there is like this either a slow release or a slow understanding of what Jesus came to do. So it wasn't like all in one shot, like here it is, get it, and everyday people are getting it. It's like over time, like think of the Reformation, right? Where we're like, wow, did we just discover grace, you know, something like that. And even the other day in staff meeting, we were studying Romans 8, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my goodness, like there's this revelatory moment where we said the entire congregation needs to know about this freedom in Christ that comes with understanding the love and the separation, you know, and all of that. And we were just blown away. And that, I don't know, maybe makes me think that God's like waiting for this moment when we will start to preach or talk about Jesus in a certain way that makes sense to a lot more people, that is inclusive of a lot more people. And he's like, you're getting there, you're kind of on the edge, and it's getting a little bit better, and let's work on having the whole world be included within my plan of salvation. I don't know. What do you,
No, I think you're right on target. If you were to go to my house, and you could do that also in Loma Linda or other places, but if you go to my house, second floor, and look out towards San Gorgonio, you see this mass, this wall. You see, and it, you know, it's like straight up. But as you drive toward it, you realize it's a gradual climb. There's a whole bunch of peaks, and in the summer, you can't tell the difference. In the winter, the real peaks have snow on them.
Yeah, that's
and there's a bit of it here and a bit of it there, and there's smaller mountains in between. It all looks like one mass.
It does.
But as you're going that way, you're going over and over and getting higher and higher until you reach the peak. And so scholars sometimes talk about the Old Testament having a two-dimensional view. It describes the end as a series of actions that seem to happen at a point in time. But Jesus comes and says, no, some of those events are inaugurated now. Some of them are yet to happen in the future. So Jesus is now in the hills working toward the end. So the kingdom has come.
I like that picture.
But the destruction of the old kingdom has not yet happened. The nations are still here. In other words, in one sense, the stone has come, but it doesn't destroy the nations now. It allows the gospel to permeate the nations and save as many as possible. But then at the end, the nations
that reminds me of Sodom and Gomorrah, where like the destruction was already prophesied, but there was like, let's pause and let's see if we can extract any more people. But then in the end, it was destroyed. Is it something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think God is patient, and as long as there are people open to making a decision, he'll let time go on. But then in the final crisis of Earth's history, as we talked about perhaps with Revelation 7, in that context you have a hardening toward goodness and a hardening toward evil until there's not many people in the middle anymore. And the close of probation, which I think you see in Revelation 10:7, when the mystery of God is finished, it's because it's not a mystery to anyone anymore. People either have embraced it or have so hardened against it that they wouldn't hear it no matter what you did.
Yeah. John, I remember a kind of a phrase, or not a phrase, but more so a teaching that you've shared in one of your books, and it was the 5 steps to the secular drift. And it was this idea of how someone could actually drift from belief, a fervent walk with God, to a space of unbelief. And I like how you say it. It's a drift, it's a slide, as opposed to making an assumption that someone overnight just said, you know what, I'm done. You know, because it truly does start to manifest itself. And I like how you start with the first step. It's this space where you have this internal processing going on. And it isn't until step 3 that you start portraying outward actions that people will recognize. So a lot of people are going through things internally where the slide is starting to happen. And it isn't until then they manifest something, they start speaking a certain way, watching things, doing things, behaving in certain ways. You're like, whoa, wait a second. They've been sliding for a while.
Yeah.
This isn't just like, oh, they all
Where
of a
did
sudden.
that come from?
Yeah. And then finally they get to the point where they're like, hey, this belief in God, the centrality of Jesus, the virgin birth, you know, the scriptures, I don't know if I believe that. There was a slide that led them down towards this path. So I really appreciated that teaching. I've preached that many times actually in churches.
You went into that deeply. That's exciting. I'll have to go read that book.
Oh, man.
Yeah, actually, I just gave that book to someone yesterday who came in and was one of our schools, was a spiritual life leader, and saying that our whole theme this year is how we reach, you know, the secular people in the community. And I says, I think I can help with that.
Yeah.
So I had an extra copy and gave it to them.
Good.
So Revelation 10:7, to conclude that, in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound. All right? So when the seventh trumpet angel, remember the time no more is the beginning of the sixth trumpet. That's mentioned here in 10:6, but also in 9:15. I think those two are parallel. But this period of time of 10:7 goes from the time no more to the seventh angel. When he's about to sound, is about to blow that trumpet, the mystery of God is finished. The mystery of God is the gospel, which was gospelized to the world according to the text. The verb for gospel is in verse 7. The gospel ceases. That means nobody on earth, you know, it's not an arbitrary decree on God's part. It's just that no one on earth anymore is going to change their minds. That's what sealing and marking is all about. Later on, we'll see the mark of the beast. Earlier, we've seen the seal of God in Revelation. When you are sealed, that means you are so trusting God, so committed to God, that like Job, no matter what happens, you know, you will trust in him. And that trust is so deep. On the other side, people who so trust in Satan's lies that nothing can shake them. They might even stand before the New Jerusalem and see the glory of God and all the rest of that, and they'll still say, let's go attack this thing. Let's get it for ourselves. It's really cool, all that gold and jewels and stuff. I want that, you know. So their mind is in a totally different direction. They're not even moved by spiritual things. So Revelation 10:7 tells us there'll be a period of time. This is God's prophetic surprise for today. We are living in the time of the end. We're living in the time between the close of Daniel's time prophecies and the close of probation.
So right before the trumpet?
Yeah.
We're like in that little gap.
Well, the sixth trumpet runs from the close of Daniel's time prophecies to whenever the close of probation is. Fortunately, it's still future, because I know a lot of people that I still need to work with, you know, and encourage and build up and stuff.
They have not completely sealed off yet.
That's right. So we see we're in that time frame. Now, when you go to Daniel 2, you have a vision and an explanation. A vision and an explanation. In visions, you can go anywhere, all the way in the past, all the way in the future. You can go anywhere in the point of time. The explanation always comes in the prophet's time and place. You see, so Nebuchadnezzar sees this vision of the future, and he goes all the way to the end and sees the stone coming down and crushing all the kingdoms. But then when he wakes up, Daniel says to him, you are the head of gold. After you comes another kingdom. After that comes another, and then finally the kingdom of God. So the explanation to make sense to Nebuchadnezzar has to come in his time and place. With Revelation 10:8, we are moving into such an explanation. We had a vision, verses 1 to 7 of Revelation, but now we come to an explanation of that vision. Would you read that for us? Revelation 10, 8 through 11.
Yes, it says, "Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, 'Go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land.' So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll, and he said to me, 'Take it and eat it. It will be bitter to your stomach, but sweet as honey in your mouth.' So I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. Then they said to me, 'You must prophesy again about many peoples and nations and languages and kings.'"
All right. So this is an explanation, in a real sense, of what's happening in Revelation 10, 1 to 7. And we'll try to figure out what exactly that is. But let's go to the last part. First of all, you see this is an acted parable. John is told, eat this scroll, and in his mouth it's sweet as honey.
Yeah.
In his stomach it's bitter. Gives him a stomach ache.
Yeah.
All right. Took too much ibuprofen or something at the wrong time. Give you a stomach
much of a
ache.
good thing.
Yeah. But then in verse 11 comes more of a plain language summary. If this is an explanation to John, what is John's disappointment? What is it that turns his stomach sour? The message is sweet, but something's turning it sour. Verse 11.
It's
You must prophesy again.
Why would that be disappointing?
Well, one of the verses that comes to mind is when Jesus is resurrected again in Luke, and he is talking to these two disciples, and he says to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared." Like, I'm assuming that could probably be a point of bitterness, saying, after all this time that I have given you this truth and we have walked together and you have not believed. Like teachers who love to teach, and yet when the student is there just like not getting it, like, oh, that hurts. I don't know. That's
You know something?
one way.
This explanation is built on just such a point. Ezekiel 2, if you want to look that up, Philip. Ezekiel 2, verse 8. And read through chapter 3, verse 3.
Ezekiel
2, 8.
verse 8.
Yeah.
Okay. You just tell me when to
And
stop.
read through the 3rd verse of chapter 3.
All right. Ezekiel 2, verse 8. "But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Be not rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. And when I looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and behold, the scroll of a book was in it. And he spread it before me, and in the writing in the front and the back, and there were written on the words of lamentation and mourning and woe. And he said to me, Son of man, eat whatever you find here. Eat this scroll and go and speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me this scroll to eat. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly with the scroll that I give to you, and fill your stomach with it. Then I ate it, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey.
All right, so this clearly sounds like what's happening here in chapter 10.
Yeah.
So it's an Old Testament allusion once again. But here's the difference. The sweet and the bitter is there. What was bitter then, that message was going to the Israelites. And it was bitter to him because they rejected it, which is, I think, the point that you were making.
The rejection.
All right?
Sure.
But here, the message is not going to the Israelites. It's going to peoples and nations and languages and kings. So it's going to the world this time. It seems to me, and I could be wrong on this, but it seems to me that John would likely have expected that this vision was kind of the capstone, that everything would come to an end. And the angel comes and says, no, John, here's the bitterness. You must prophesy again. This book is not enough. This book will prophesy for you again. It's a prophecy that the book of Revelation will continue to impact the world after John's day. But for John, that would be a disappointment.
Yeah.
Because he would have hoped that
It would be over.
he would have seen the end of it all.
I think of medical students that sometimes come and talk with me, tell me of a woe that they've been just experiencing. They have to repeat a course.
Ooh,
oh man, that hurts. They thought they would be done with this. They spent all this time, this money, this effort, and then one of the admissions deans says, "I'm so sorry, you have to do it again. There's more to go. There's more to learn, and you just didn't get the score." And it's almost like Jesus saying, "Hey, there's more people that need to hear. You got to."
So you're in medical school and you have to go to summer school.
Yeah, very real thing. I just talked to a student about that today.
Yeah, so that's a disappointment here. So John himself probably thought, he says, the time is near. I mean, what are you going to take that? He says, the time is near. It wasn't near when Jesus was around. He says, well, when you see all these things, then know that it's near. John says it's near. So we've already gotten there, but time has gone on, and no one was more disappointed than John.
Yeah.
But at the time, when in the vision, Daniel's time prophecy came to end, and other people were disappointed.
Yeah. I think of those in the Millerite movement of the mid-19th century with William Miller. They all banked their lives on this idea, Jesus is coming. October 22, 1844. I want to read to you a quote by a gentleman named Hiram Edson.
Oh, that's a good one.
Who kind of portrays this almost collective spirit of what everyone was going through at that time. And here's something that he writes. Edson spent October 22, 1844 with friends waiting for this event of Jesus coming. But they experienced incredible heartbreak, and he writes the following. Our fondest hopes and expectations were blasted, and such a spirit of weeping came over us as I had never experienced before. It seemed as that the loss of all earthly friends could have been no comparison. We wept and wept till the day dawned. Jesus had not arrived.
Ouch.
Deeply disappointing. And so you see, this explanation, while it's given to John, also is relevant to what we saw in the text itself, that time would be no more, and yet it would go on. And those people, like John, would have to, the Millerites, they thought it was all over.
Right.
And like John, they're getting the message, you have to go preach again.
Right.
And if they'd have known it would last more than 150 years, they might have been even more crushed. But the beautiful thing about it, for them, is the realization that God had foreseen their experience, that they were not going through this all alone. So God was with them. So even in the toughest times, God is with us. And when we know that He's foreseen what we're going through, all the better. Well, we're coming to an end again, God's prophetic surprises. And we've spent some time here in Revelation 10, and I'd encourage you until next week to study Revelation 11 in preparation for our meeting next time. So until next time, this is GPS, God's prophetic surprises. See you then.